October 1777, and Stony Point, July 1779. In October 1777, patriots watched helplessly as the British burned sites as far north as the House of Claremont before turning back to New York City. Major General Horatio Gates would right some of the wrongs when he accepted the surrender of Lieutenant General John Burgoyne's British Army at Saratoga on October the 17th, 1777, marking the turning point of the war. Starting in January 1778, the Americans would follow up this victory by turning their attention from the ruins of Fort Constitution to building Fortress West Point. With its famous chain across the Hudson, a complex that General George Washington called the Key of America. In the summer of 1781, the French commander, the Comte de Rochambeau, marched his 5,000-man army from Rhode Island to Phillipsburg, New York, to join the Continental Army, first in the siege of New York, and then in the pivotal Yorktown campaign in Virginia. General Washington and his main army would encamp at Newburgh and New Windsor Cantonment in 1782 and 1783 as an army of observation of the British Army in New York City as peace was being negotiated. Finally, on November the 25th, which used to be celebrated as Evacuation Day 1783, Governor George Clinton would lead the Americans into that city after the British evacuation. A war that started in Massachusetts had shifted and remained centered and then ended in New York. On Veterans Day, you should remember those Americans who fought in the war for American independence and gave us the freedoms and opportunities that we enjoy today. Captain Henry Pauling of the 3rd Regiment of the Ulster County Militia wrote after the battle at Forts Montgomery near the present-day Bear Mountain Bridge on October the 6th, 1777, a brisk firing was kept up. A very brisk firing continued. The upper redoubt was stormed and carried by the enemy. They then gave 3 huzzas. We answered it by huzzaing them 3 times for the Congress. Showers of balls were then poured upon us, but did no damage. 350 men were casualties on the American side. 70 men were killed. The British had 40 killed and 150 wounded. What we value, we pay for in blood. I'm now going to set out from my American Revolutionary role and bring you some perspective on Veterans Day. Because we should remember the past and those who sacrificed for us then and are with us today. Remembering the fallen dead is as old as the Greeks. In fact, what we do at Veterans Day was done in 431 BC by the famous Athenian leader Pericles. In his famous funeral oration, he said these words about his fellow Athenian soldiers who had fought for their democracy. They gave Athens their lives, to her and to all of us, and for their own selves, they won praises that never grow old. The most splendid of sepulchres, not the sepulchre in which their bodies are laid, but where their glory remains eternal in men's minds, always there on the right occasion to stir others to speech or to action. The American Civil War was the bloodiest in our history. The trials for the soldiers on both sides extended beyond the battlefield. Major Henry Metcalf, 58 Pennsylvania Volunteers, wrote letters home to his wife throughout the war. This excerpt reveals how lonely and miserable he was. I have no news, no mails, no papers. We have had a very unpleasant time for some time here. Rainy, wet, and scouting continually. Mud, knee-deep. Creeks to wade. But understand the order has come to stop all this. Hence we will have more rest. The men need rest. We have driven or scared the rebels back. Accept, my dear wife, the love of your absent husband. As you heard previously, President Abraham Lincoln summed up the sacrifices of men like Henry Metcalf when he consecrated the cemetery at Gettysburg after the bloody 3-day battle in which almost 8,000 men on both sides lost their lives. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished business which they have fought here, thus so far have advanced so nobly. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the full measure of devotion. That we're highly resolved that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. It would take the deaths in the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam to equal the 620,000 Americans who gave their lives in the American Civil War, our bloodiest conflict. My mother and father were among the 16.3 million Americans who served in World War II. I served for 30 years in the regular Army. Both of my brothers served careers in the Army. My brother Bill is a Major General serving today with the U.S. Transportation Command. My cousin, Captain Charles B. Johnson, was the first Georgian killed in Vietnam. 58,000 would lose their lives during that war. The men and women whom we remember on Veterans Day gave their lives and their service for us, for America, and for what we value. As Pericles said, where the rewards of valor are the greatest, there you will find also the best and the bravest spirits among the people. These stories are part of you. History is about people. You as a person are the sum of your history. In closing, I would like to read from something that my son wrote when he was working on an independent study with Henry Metcalf's papers when he was at Center College in Kentucky. Adam wrote that Henry Metcalf's life also came to serve as a tangible reminder of the frequently overshadowed personal side of war. The side buried beneath the monuments on battlefields, the statistics of casualties, and the legends of generals. Far too often, the bigger picture of events blurs the focus on the individual participants. These were the people who longed for their families, whose thoughts of home consumed them. These were the ones who struggled with their faith in both God and country. War, by its very nature, is inhumane, but human stories build the foundation for war and for what price wars are fought. And Henry Metcalf's account is no exception. Though seemingly insignificant in the larger scheme of core events that made up the Civil War, his simple story remains remarkable because of its unremarkable nature. He was an ordinary soldier with common beliefs and hardships during an extraordinary time. His unique and universal experiences thus provide a small window into the past through which those of us today can vicariously peer, enabling us to catch a glimpse of the struggles of the Civil War created in the heart, the home front, and the battlefield. Learn about your past so you will know who you are. Value your past and remember the great sacrifices that those who've gone before you have made. Tomorrow, think of the soldiers who died so that you can grow up free in America. Today, we remember those who have served. These soldiers fought and survived. Their loved ones supported them while they were gone to war. They are truly our heroes. And so I would like for all of you to join me and our officers in leading the salute that was given by the Continental Army. You already heard that in my remarks. To the veterans. Hip, hip, huzzah! Hip, hip,